Welcome back to Wrenching Raccoon. Alright, we're I'm walking down to the shop now. I couldn't find a new shaft for that turbo, but I may have found a solution. I've got a bunch of turbos just laying around. I took one, was just going to swap the exhaust housing and just use the rest of the old turbo and see what it would do. But the wheel on the hot side is too small, didn't fit in the housing properly. But I got to looking at the factory turbos, and the non-VGT turbo, the wheel, and I know there's a name for it, I just forget the proper terminology for the hot side of the turbo. Wheel's about the hot side is about the same size as the one that came out of the turbo. So I ripped apart the factory non-VGT, and it fits perfect in the housing. The shaft appears to be close enough I can make it work. So we're gonna give that a go, see what happens. Gotta love it. Gotta love it. Yeah, so I pulled the shaft out of this one, because this one's got the VGT solenoid and all that jazz. So gutted this turbo. There's the rest of it there. That's the old shaft out of the one. I was gonna try and push it back in there, put all that back together. That way that is a usable core. All the other pieces to the turbo are down under there soaking and have been all week. We had vacation Bible school at my church this week, so I have not been able to get down here. I did get the injection pump gear swapped over. This is the new pump. So I'm gonna get this guy bolted down into place, get everything in here cleaned up first, and then we'll start dealing with the turbo. That way at least the engine is, you know, somewhat sealed up-ish. Alright. Oh, hey Fancy Pants. You snuck up on me. Bomba de fuel. turbo is blown apart. It doesn't appear that I'm going to be able to use this shaft. This is the one out of the factory turbo. This is the one for this turbo, but I have bent the mess out of this thing. Which I'm pretty sure it's bent. Oh yeah, it's bent. So, I'm back to square one. Finding a shaft. That I can use. Dadgummit. there's another difference too. This thing's supposed to apparently, right there is supposed to sit in there pretty tight, and it's not. So this is not gonna work. Yay. I'm gonna go ahead and put this center section back together with the new parts. That way I don't forget how to put it back together. So, we can at least do that. charcoal metallic, if you were curious. Waiting on the paint to dry. So let's mess with this a little bit more. Well, I gotta find some metric hex cap bolts because I can't leave that like that. I don't have any here, so I'm gonna buy some. So once I get the turbo assembled, get some hardware, we'll come back to this. See y'all then. Well, there's one other thing I can do. So where the two turbos were tied together, there's that bend that went here. Well, this guy was mounted to it, and this guy was mounted to it. So all that's holding this up is this, but there's not a lot of weight there, so that's probably fine. But I need something to hold this. So I'm gonna take whatever this is and just weld it to the bottom of there and the bottom of there. And that'll take care of that. Yeah, sure. I'm gonna try something with this housing. This can of paint is it's a one-time deal, so I've got 4 hours to use it all. I'm going to attempt to take this little buffing pad thing here and knock the paint off of where it says Borg Warner and all the raised letters and numbers. It's dry. I don't know if it's dry enough. If I make a mess of it, I can just paint over it again. So we'll see what happens. What do you think of that? I think it looks pretty good. It looks blue on here on the camera. I don't know what it's going to look like when I finally upload it onto the computer, but it is very, very purple. Like, that doesn't even look like the same color, but in person it's dead on the money. But even smoothed out some of the casting and the letters and on that, whatever that thing is. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Alright, is this thing dry enough for me to assemble? No, that is still really sticky. Alright, so I'm done. We're gonna clean up, go up to the house, edit this into with the other one, and then whenever I get some hardware, I think that's all I need is hardware, and then I can put the rest of it back together. So, see y'all then.